everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today we're going to talk to you about this Kel-Tec PMR-30 that one of our local viewers was kind enough to lend us. It's a 30 round capacity pistol that's chambered in 22 WMR, 22 Magnum. I could show you a few of the cool things about this. First off, it's a polymer and aluminum. So the frame is polymer, the receiver is integral and is aluminum. So the gun is exceptionally light, and even with the slightly powerful 22 WMR cartridge, there's almost no recoil. It's got an exceptionally light trigger, and it's actually quite a bit of fun at the range. So let me show you a few things about this particular gun. First, we'll start with that it is unloaded. One of the things that makes this unique is it does have the European mag release, which, it's a bit polarizing. A lot of people really don't like that. Others find it quite helpful. You just push a little bit on the lever, the magazine pops out. They are polymer mags. They actually kind of feel like metal when you're handling them, but they are polymer. They hold 30 rounds. Now the 22 Magnum is a rimmed cartridge, so there are some, a little bit of quirks to load in the magazine, and I'll show you that a little bit later in the video. The magazine slides in very easily and locks in place. The gun does have a Picatinny rail if you wanted to put lights, lasers, or any sort of accessory on it. The sights, the factory sights that it comes with, the front sight is adjustable. It's a dovetail, but it's a little bit unique dovetail, and it does require special tooling to do anything with it. And the rear sight is fixed. Both sights are fiber optic, and the fiber optic tubes are replaceable by the end user, but you can't actually replace the sights themselves with a different sight. The gun itself is well balanced. It's easy to hold, it's easy to grip. These squares give you a nice solid purchase on the gun when you're holding on to it. It doesn't move around in your hand at all, but it doesn't beat your hand up or hurt you in any way. They're not abrasive or aggressive. It does have an external safety. Right now it's in the safe position. Flick it down to fire. Flick it up for safe. So it's similar to a 1911, but it is a little bit harder to get to with your thumb. It's kind of a little bit further back and a little bit more effort to get to it. From a trigger perspective, this gun has a surprisingly nice trigger. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any 22 WMR or snap caps, and you really shouldn't dry fire any 22 or any rim fire, so I can't demonstrate the trigger to you. But I will tell you that when firing this gun, the trigger was exceptionally smooth and very light trigger, and very easy to get follow-up shots. In fact, you have to kind of pay attention a little bit. It's easy to get a follow-up shot a little sooner than you were planning on. So as triggers go on a polymer pistol like this, it's a very pleasant trigger. It's been very reliable. It does have a little bit of ammo sensitivity due to the nature of the integral feed ramp. And I'll see if I can get it where you can see this. You can see that the round, if it were positioned, the round would be right here. The next round to feed would hit this ramp right there and then slide into the barrel. And I'll show you there's a little extension on the barrel. When I get it apart, I'll show you there's a little barrel extension. So if you have like a soft tip or some hollow points, if the hollow point tip itself has gotten beat up a little bit, they may have a tendency to hang up. But with FMJ, it will work perfectly. So something like the Winchester Super X soft tip, they don't work well in this. The tips hang up and create just enough drag that it tends to not want to feed properly. So stick with FMJ or high quality hollow points and keep them in good condition, and you won't really have any ammo issues with this. Kel-Tec has, one of those mixed reputations. Some people don't like Kel-Tec, and one of the things you will find with Kel-Tec is they do make some really cool stuff. Things like this PMR-30 and some of their other guns. Once they get the manufacturing quirks out of it, like this one here has been flawless. At least talking to the owner of it. So don't immediately dismiss Kel-Tec. Look at their guns, and once they've got the quirks out, usually after the first year, they make some really interesting stuff you can have a lot of fun with. So let me show you how to take this thing apart and clean it. And when you're choosing ammo for it, consult the manual. The manual actually does have some pretty good recommendations as to which ammo works reliably in it and which ammo is a little bit more sensitive. And that's not unusual for rimfire ammo. So let's go ahead and take this apart. We'll start with that it is unloaded. And we're going to remove the magazine. So you push the magazine release, take the magazine out. Put it back into battery and engage the safety. The next step of it is there's a pin right here that we're going to pop out from the other side to release the slide. And you can actually kind of get it with your finger, but it's also, you're taking a kind of a plastic pick or tool that won't scratch up the frame, and just push the pin through, and it protrudes through the other side. Pull the pin out, set it aside. At this point, you can see as it just started to come apart right away, it slides right apart. So we'll look at the frame first. Got a polymer frame with aluminum receiver insert, and this is your part of your feed ramp. Got the ejector and the sear and other trigger mechanism here at the back. The frame itself is exceptionally light, and it's really solid construction. It's a well put together solid frame. And then on the slide, it's got a little bit of a unique setup. You've got a buffer here at the front, and it's critical that you do have this in place when you're operating the gun. Then you have your recoil spring, and the recoil spring's not captive, so when you go to pop the spring out, make sure you have a good hold on it and it's pointed in a safe direction, because if you get loose from you, it will fly. And then this is part of the slide and guide mechanism, and I'll show you how that comes out when we get the rest of it apart. So let's start by removing the recoil spring, and it pops out starting at this end, so you kind of pull it back a little bit and pop it out. And it may take me a second to do this because you kind of got to get a hold of the spring and pull the spring back. It's not super easy to do. But you notice I just kind of pulled it back, and I did have to put my hand in the way. What I did when I put my hand in the way is I was holding the slide down and also kind of covering. So I was covering so if it did get away from me, it wouldn't go flying at Hammer, who's operating the camera. Once I popped it back and up, then I pull it out and I have the spring free. Then you remove the buffer. Now it's important when you remove the buffer to pay attention to which way it goes, but inevitably you'll pull it out and drop it on the table and you'll forget. Now see if I can get the camera to focus on this, which might be a little bit difficult because of the, there it goes. You can see there's slight ramping right here. There's a little bit of curvature right there. That goes towards the front of the slide. And the other indication, if it's not a new one, if it's one you've had in a while, and it's going to again be a little bit difficult to show on camera, if I get that angle there, you can kind of see it's kind of beat up a little bit, and that's where the slide's been slamming into it. So that gives you another indication of which side goes towards the front. But it's important to put this back in. Number one, it has to be there, and number two, in the correct orientation. Okay, what I did is I stopped for a second and put this thing on my hand, and I think I'll be able to get the camera to focus enough. You can see hopefully I don't disturb the focus in doing this, you can see the ramp right there, and then I'll flip it over, and you can see where it's kind of, beaten up a little bit, and it's had its, move it around a little bit, you can see a little bit of view. So that kind of helps you figure out which way that thing goes. The other thing you'll find, if it's been in there any length of time, it'll get a little curvature to it, and when you go to put it in, it won't look right when you put it in the wrong way around. So I'll continue on now. I've got the springs out, the buffer's out, and now what we need to do is remove this sliding mechanism. And all you do is you slide it all the way to the front, and then grip it from the side and just kind of wiggle it out, which it can be a little twitchy. If you don't get it just right, it won't come out. If you have to use any force at all, then you don't have it right. So just kind of slide it back and forth, pull the barrel forward, hold your hands just quite right, and it'll slide right out. And then this component you would clean and oil. And then the barrel, just slide back forward again until it's back into normal battery position, and lift it up and out. And you can see that this is an interesting little barrel. It's got a few different constructs on it from what you're used to seeing in your typical Glock style gun. It's a 4.3 inch barrel. And I had mentioned during the initial video that there was a little protrusion of the feed ramp, and that's right here. And this will mate with the piece in the frame to result in the feeding. And if you have ammo that's got damage cases or a soft tip, it'll have a tendency to hang up, and that may make it not want to go in. And I'll show you the rest of the slide. A little bit different than some of the other guns that you're used to seeing. Of course, the safety is not on the slide on this, it's on the frame. Now this does not have a drop safety mechanism in the slide. So you are relying on having the manual safety in the safe position, so that it's one you want to be a little more careful with than maybe some of the others. Let's go ahead and put it back together, and we'll start with talking about the barrel. I mentioned the feed ramp, that little nub there at the beginning. This needs to be facing up in the slide, which would basically, when the gun's put together, would be facing down, so it faces the magazine. Otherwise, it won't want to go back together, and that'd be one of the reasons you might have a hard time getting it back together. So all you have to do is take the barrel, drop it in, and one of the things I'll do before I put the barrel and make it easier to show you, I'm going to make a mention of these a little bit later in the video. There's a notch right here, and then there's another one further up. And these two notches, this piece here slides into, there's little wings on it. So when we go to put it back together, I'll be talking about those. So take the barrel, drop the barrel in place, and pull it all the way forward. And make sure it sits level. You don't want it tipped up like that. So just pull it all the way forward, sit level. Then take this piece and line it up with those notches, and then drop it in place. And if you did it right, it'll just slide. So once you drop it in, it should just slide smoothly. If it hangs up, if it's tough, if you have to put any force on it at all, stop, back off, pull it back out, and give it another try. One thing you'll find too, if it hasn't been cleaned, which presumably if you're taking it apart and putting it back together, you've cleaned it, but if you haven't cleaned it, carbon can get into those guides and make it a little bit difficult. Once you've got it reassembled, just pull it back. It'll pull the barrel back with it, and now we're going to put the buffer and the recoil spring back in. So we'll take the buffer, and with those rounded pieces that I mentioned earlier facing forward, slide the buffer into place, and it just drops in there and sits. There's not anything that particularly retains it other than just friction. And then we're going to take the recoil spring and put it back in. Now the recoil spring does have a direction. If you look at the one end and make it a little bit easier, there's a bit of a mushroom head on this end, and I'll flip it over, and it's kind of more rounded. The mushroom head faces the front of the slide. And this can be a bit of a trick to put in, but we're going to line the mushroom head up with the hole in the slide, and then basically just take this, pull it back. But when you go to do that, you're also going to have to be aligning it so that the guide rod goes through the hole in order to get it to clear. That may be a little difficult to do that on camera and actually get a hold of it, so I'm going to just describe it, and then I'm going to go ahead and do it, and we'll get back to it. Okay, now that time I was able to do it on the first try. Basically, I grabbed a hold of it, wiggled it just right, pushed it forward, and once I pushed it forward, I dropped it down into the slot and let it come back, and now it's locked in place. To reassemble, relatively easy. Line the guides up, slide it back, and then it should just sit there. It's back in. Nothing that you don't have to line up any tabs, but you can see through that hole. And we're just going to drop the pin back in there. So take the pin from the left side across, stick it in the hole, push it across. Now this gun did just come back from the range. Normally I clean it before we do a video, but the owner's with me. We're going to do the video and then I'm going to return the gun to him. So we are now fully reassembled and ready to go. Now in a few seconds I'm going to show you how to load the magazines. There are some quirks to loading the magazines on this because it's a rimmed cartridge, but I will tell you that this was a pleasure to have at the range. It's an excellent little range gun, a good varmint gun. Theoretically it's potentially could be reliable enough for home defense, and with 30 rounds, there's quite a bit there. But you do have to keep in mind that there is, it's rimfire. It's still rimfire, and rimfires have, various issues with the ammo itself, which, despite the power of the 22 MR and having 30 rounds, it's not necessarily the best candidate for home defense due to the ammo. And the other characteristic of it you'll find is, despite getting a nice fireball out of the muzzle when you pull the trigger and being a fairly powerful round, there's almost no recoil. So a new shooter would have no problem shooting this gun. So I'm going to set the thing down, I'm going to get a magazine, and I'm going to show you how to do the magazine, but because I'm going to bring ammo to the table, I'm going to put the gun away for a moment. Okay, I've got the magazines, the gun's put away for the moment. These are rimmed cartridges. So loading rimmed cartridges into a magazine is a little different than loading 223 or 9mm or any of the rebated cartridges, because you have to make sure that the rims line up properly with each other, or you'll get something called rim lock, which will jam the magazine. So on this magazine, and there's a little cutout right here, about halfway through the magazine. And all you're going to do to load it, if you want to load one by hand, is you're going to line the cartridge up with that cutout, just push down and back. When you go to load the second cartridge, you would repeat that, down and back. And now what you'll notice is the rims are one in front of the other, and it'll stagger back and forth as the magazine loads. If those rims end up parallel to each other side by side, that's rim lock, and the gun will jam. And not only that, you'll have a little fun trying to poke the ammo enough to try to get them to loosen up so that you can even unload the magazine. Now, the first 20 or so rounds are fairly easy to load that way. When you get near the bottom of the mag, it starts to get increasingly difficult. And the wall thickness of these rounds is not very thick. Basically, it's an extended 22 case. So it's not a very thick case. And it's very easy with the rim of one, when you're pushing down, especially as the magazine gets fully loaded, to actually damage one of these, to kink it. And if you do that, you'll invariably end up with a jam. There's the company that makes a speed loader for it, and I'll put a link in the comments to give you a little information about this. Kind of helps with that. Now, it's a little bit of a quirk. It's a little bit different than, like a Lula or some of the other loaders. What you're going to do, and I'll show you in a second, you have to have the loader on when you do this, but to make it easy to see on the camera, you want to have the round lined up where the edge of the case pretty much lines up with the bullet below it. If you have it too far back or too far forward, it's either going to jam or you're going to kink your case. So it's kind of about that right. But what you have to do is put the loader on, set it up a little bit, slide the round in, lined up like that, and then push the loader down, then take the tension off it and push the round back. So it's kind of a little like a three-step process, and you can work your way through it. With that process, you're far less likely to dent one of the cases and result in a jam. So this little loader, it was printed on a 3D printer actually. This little loader makes life a lot easier with these magazines. You can load them by hand. Invariably, you're going to dent the occasional case and you're going to chew your fingers up, or you can get something like this and load it much more easily. So I'm going to set the magazines aside, get the gun, give you a few more pieces of information about it, and wrap up. So what we've got here is about 15 ounces of fun. It's not necessarily a small gun. It's 7.9 inches long, 5.8 inches tall, and 1.3 inches thick. But this isn't meant to be a concealed carry gun. This is a range gun. This is a a varmint gun, something like that, where you would either just be having it out or you might have it outside the waistband holster. The other thing you're going to find with this is the slide is exceptionally light on it. It's very easy to cycle it, which is not surprising because the power of the 22 WMR. But anybody can cycle the slide on this. So a gun like this is an excellent range toy. With 30 rounds in it, you could just have a blast all day with it. You probably will want to come to the range with your mags preloaded. It's a bit of a hassle to load them, that process. You buy a few extra mags, come with them preloaded. But you've got a perfect gun for introductory shooters, children with supervision, or anybody that wants to do some shooting. I wouldn't recommend this for home defense or concealed carry merely because of the rimfire cartridge. The gun itself has proven to be quite reliable, but you are subject to the nature of the ammo. So if you like our videos, give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, and have a great day.
Okay.